morning, everyone. Welcome to the 33rd Annual Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Breakfast. Dr. King traveled the world to preach a message of tolerance and nonviolence. It is with a tremendous sense of pride that I join with the Greater Framingham Community Church to welcome you and members of the Metro West community. As Chief of Police in the city, I am honored to have been chosen by Mayor Yvonne Spicer to be in this role. She is the first of many first mayor of this new city of Framingham, the first female to hold that office, and the first African American to hold that position. This is what Dr. King was promoting, a chance to be judged by your qualities and your abilities rather than by your gender or by the color of your skin. No violence was needed to make this happen. Diversity is important to me. One of my goals is to make the police department reflect the diversity of our community. The department is striving to express compassion and empathy as the officers interact with residents, whether they are witnesses of crimes, whether they are victims, or whether they are offenders. Looking at the challenges that we face in America today, your presence here is public affirmation that you hear the call to action. It's affirmation of your commitment to family, brotherhood, and community. We hope this morning that we can relive the words of Dr. King and leave renewed and inspired to move forward with the work that is yet to be done. It's my privilege to introduce our MC for this morning's program, Sherrod Blakely. Sherrod Blakely is a digital media reporter for the NBC Sports Boston. He covers the Boston Celtics and the NBA. The Syracuse, New York native has worked for more than 20 years as both print and digital media journalist. He earned a fully paid scholarship from Syracuse University's prestigious I. Newhouse School of Public Communications, which allowed him to study abroad in London. Sherrod Blakely is currently serving his second term as chair of the National Association of Black Journalists Sports Task Force, the largest group of sports journalists of color in the country. His complete bio is included in your program booklet. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Sherrod Blakely.
Good morning. Good morning. I know it's Monday. I know most of us aren't working today, but we can do better than that. Good morning. There we go. There we go. There we go. Well, first of all, thank you, Steve, for a great introduction. That bio, something else. That boy's something else, I tell you. But I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here with you all this wonderful day. One that has special meaning for me beyond the fact that it's Martin Luther King Jr.'s national holiday. And I'll get to that a little bit later. But this is a man who, on too many levels to get into, was the ultimate game changer. Someone whose presence, purpose, and passion elevated this country, this world in ways that we never saw coming, and frankly, I don't know if we ever will have someone who was that big a difference maker. At this time, please join me as we sing Lift Every Voice and Sing. And for those who don't know the words, we got you covered. Open your booklets, page 13, got you covered. I told you, we got you covered. Page 13, you read along. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring.
Sing a song.
to it in a minute, I promise. But it's just a really, for me, on a very personal level, just a deep day of significance. But before we go any further, I want to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors and supporters whose times, talents, and treasures made this day possible. Our sponsors include the TJX Companies Incorporated, Framingham State University, Wayside Youth and Family, Atrius Health, Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, and Mass Bay Community College. And our sponsors include Access Framingham, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, the Rho Epsilon Omega Chapter, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, the South Middlesex Chapter, and our host venue here, the Verve Crown Plaza. One more time, let's have a nice round of applause for our sponsors and supporters. But I want to give another shout out to the mayor of the city of Framingham. Historic on so many levels, the city's dynamic, but also she's kicking off this new city by being the first African-American woman in that position. And we wish you the best of luck going forward and many, many years of great leadership, which I am confident we will have under your watch. And again, just want to shout you out and thank you for doing what you do. And now we'll have a few words from Senator Spilka.
Good morning. Good morning. We could do better. I think you guys need more coffee. Good morning. Good morning. Much better, much better. I am on the latter side of the group that I don't sing too well. I love to sing, but I enjoyed it. It was great hearing all of you lift your voices this morning for Dr. Martin Luther King. I'm Karen Spilka, the president of the Massachusetts State Senate and senator from Framingham, native, Ashland. It's a job that I love, and I feel like it's really consistent with all that Martin Luther King stood for as well. So it's a real honor and a pleasure to be here this morning to share this day of both celebration and remembrance. Thank you to the Reverend Dr. J. Anthony Lloyd and his whole team at the church, and thank you to Ramo Herring, the chair of this year's MLK Breakfast. I'd like to acknowledge EJ, and it's great to have you here. I read your bio. We have something in common. I love all the Marvel movies, too. They're great. And I'd like to acknowledge the reps, Jack Lewis, Carmen Gentile, Maria Robinson, and also at least acknowledge Javier Savalas of Framingham State, Dave Podell from Mass Bay, Dr. Tremblay, and of course the mayor as well. If I missed anybody, I'm sorry, but thank you for being here. The anniversary of Dr. King's birthday every year always causes me, and I'm sure you as well, to reflect on the promise of America and how much work we still need to do to make Dr. King's dream a true reality. This morning, I'm here to listen, and I'm also here to offer my partnership. Our nation, I believe, unfortunately, is in a fight for the very heart and soul of our nation these days. A fight to ensure that we live up to our highest ideals of liberty and justice and equal rights for all of our people here. And this is a fight that we have to win. We have to win. And I'm here to say that the Massachusetts Senate stands with you in this fight all the way. Together, we will work to ensure that our shared future is one of hope, equality, and progress. And that we will work to win that fight to regain the full heart and soul of our nation. Right here in Massachusetts, we just signed into law a $1.5 billion investment in our future. I hope you all know what I'm referring to. It's an investment to ensure that all of our children in our public schools have access to a high-quality education. And know that we will continue to fight for justice everywhere, but that we must all speak up. We must all speak out. We must speak out for environmental justice. We must speak out for justice and equity in transportation. We must speak out for better access to physical and mental health care. We must speak out for continued access to criminal justice reform. And we must speak out to ensure all people have access to good jobs and quality housing. As Dr. King once said, we may have all come on different ships, but we're moving in the same boat now. And I personally think that is a boat worth working to move forward. Because we are, and I quote him again, because who better, you know, he can say it a lot better than me, because we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down the waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. So let's keep working together to not only keep that ship afloat and moving forward, but to fulfill the dream of Dr. King and the promise of America. Thank you very much.
I think about just when the reference to ships and when it comes to taking us to that next level, to really to live and breathe Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s mantra. As important as it is to improve the ship that we're in, I'm all about building a fleet. I'm all about building a MLK fleet of leaders. And for me, that starts with our youth. And as I look out here and I see a lot of young people with tremendous promise, I see elders with amazing wisdom and guidance and a desire to teach and pass along their knowledge. And that, for me, ties in with Dr. Martin Luther King and just my relationship with him. My son was born on the MLK holiday in 1998. And so this day, I can't help but think about MLK on my firstborn's birthday. As he gets on a plane in about 45 minutes in back to his college for his last semester. Thank you, Jesus! Been in it 4 years. This was a very big day for us. We had our moment this morning where we say, hey, Dad, miss you too, but gotta get on that plane and finish this thing out. But yeah, we see the finish line. But in raising him though, and with just the timing of his birthday, there's no way to get around wanting an MLK influence on him. We're like a lot of parents, you want to give them everything you have. You want to teach them right from wrong. You want to have them establish their own faith-based system so that when they do have trials and tribulations, they can make the right decision. And they don't need mom and dad to hold their hand in doing that. So that's one of the many tenets that I have taken from MLK. And I try to instill in my son. And as any parent here knows, some days it's working. Other days, not so good. What I've learned is that a lot of those lessons that may not seem like they're resonating, you'd be surprised how much they retain. With my son in particular, when he was 7 or 8, his maternal great-grandfather passed away, and we're at the funeral, and they get to that point where they say, if anyone has any, words, come to the stage now. And I just remember him looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and I'm thinking like, what? And next thing I know, he lets Daddy's hand go, he walks up there, he gets on the mic, and he starts talking about how his great-grandfather gave the best hugs, and how he used to sneak him candy even though he wasn't supposed to, and his parents really didn't know. But for some reason, my son felt this was a confessional moment, so I'm thinking, what else are you going to tell us that we don't know? But as you can imagine, when you see a 7-year-old talking like that, just being so candid about how he feels about a family member, he got a little misty in the building. And at one point, he says, because he sees this, and I think he was starting to feel a little bit emotional too. But he held it in. I was shocked because, he's a sensitive kid, but he held it in and he said, everyone, it's going to be okay. He's with Mama now, and they're going to be okay. He's going to be happier. He's going to be okay. And I'm thinking like, yo, that's my dude. That's my dude. But it was one of those moments that when I reflect on it, I think about all the things about all the lessons that we talked about that I would speak to him when he was even in the womb, not knowing if he could hear about how when the moment comes to be a leader, don't twitch, don't blink, do the job. Do what you know you're supposed to do. Understand that sometimes the most important thing you can do is not the most comfortable thing to do.
I'm a big believer in learning how to understand the power of being comfortable with being uncomfortable. For those of us who've gone to colleges that were not quite as diverse as we want them to be, you understand early what being comfortable with being uncomfortable is like.
For those of us who have jobs that put us in very perilous situations where things just don't look great for us to be successful, you learn how to navigate how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think about MLK, and I think about how many times was he told, what you doing, Juan? You don't have to do this. And he never wavered. He never blinked. He just did the job that had to be done. And that, for me, is what I often come back to when I think about his legacy, when I think about all the many things that he has done and influenced and impacted me personally and the lives of those around me. One of the things that I do, and Police Chief had touched on it, I'm the chair of the NABJ, National Association of Black Journalists Sports Task Force. And one of our jobs is one of my jobs is to be an advocate for black journalists. And sometimes that involves having conversations with companies that they don't want to have conversations about. Could it have a negative impact on my career? Yeah. Could they blackball me? Yup. Does that make me hesitate? No. Because I know I'm charged with doing the job. And I embrace the fact that I'm cool with being comfortable, with being uncomfortable. Because as we look back on Martin Luther King Jr. and all that he did,
I think sometimes we forget that his position was not a popular one. It was not one where everyone said, hey, you're right. We need to have more diversity. We need to do better with housing. No, it was not all cool and rainbows and ponies. No, it was tough. It was a grind, and it was not acceptable.
And many facets of this country, and yet he was not deterred. He stayed on a mission. He learned how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so that's one of the many lessons I learned from him. And as we struggle with trying to find our footing, to be effective leaders, to be effective in our homes, to be effective on our jobs, learning to be comfortable with uncomfortable is huge. I would strongly encourage us all to try to be a little bit more comfortable with being uncomfortable. I see what it did for Martin Luther King Jr. and his people. It's not bad. And I think back, and when I think about that, I think back to my son. As everyone was just kind of, pulling out the Kleenex and and all that. And I just remember him saying, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And soon, we're going to be more than okay here because we got an amazing, amazing program. So you guys ready to begin? Yes. All right, let's get started. Now, to lift us up and bring us together in prayer, we have a musical selection by Myran Brass, followed by Rabbi Allison Poirier. Did I pronounce your name right? See, just footnote, her last name is the same last name of a player that the Boston Celtics signed this year. I didn't even talk to you about that. But I spent a good 4 days working on pronouncing his name. So when I'm thinking that, I may never use his name unless he plays. I get to use it today. I'm ready. I nailed it. So we will hear from her, but first, musical selection from Myran Brass.
Good morning. Good morning. Delighted to be here to share with you this morning. And I'd like to share a song that was recorded by Nina Simone, a musical genius and a civil rights activist. New World Coming. Just around the bend. There's a new world coming. This one is at an end. There are new voices calling. You can hear them if you try. It's growing stronger and stronger with each day that passes by. There's a brand new dawning, rising clear and sweet and free. There's a brand new morning. This one's for you and me. There's a new world coming, the one that we had visions of. It's coming in peace, it's coming in joy, it's coming in love. There's a new world coming, and it's just around the bend. There's a new world coming. This one is at an end. There's a new world coming, the one that we had visions of. It's coming in peace, it's coming in joy. I said it's coming in peace, it's coming in joy, it's coming in peace, it's coming in joy, it's coming in love. Coming in love.
Thank you, Reverend Lloyd, for inviting me to be here. In the 6 months that I've lived in this city, I have been moved beyond words by the leadership of our government and of my clergy colleagues. So I'm really honored to stand here among you. I reminded my congregation at Beth Sholom this weekend that our liturgical calendar has just started our reading of the book of Exodus, which is, of course, an important sacred text to both of our communities. And in the book of Exodus, one of the most important commandments that God gives the Israelite people is to remember in every generation must see itself as if they personally left Egypt. And Egypt was a long time ago, so it can be hard to remember. But our mystical tradition tells us that the name for Egypt, Mitzrayim, the name for Egypt means a narrow place, a place where it is difficult for you to be yourself, where it is difficult for your soul to reach the divine, where something is hard for you. And we certainly have our share of difficult things in this generation. And so, our community, the Jewish community, your community here at Greater Framingham Community Church, we have things we share in those difficulties, and we have differences too in how those difficulties affect us. But the thing that is most important for me to invoke and to share with you today is how we share this holy text that tells us that we personally have left Egypt, that we are going to walk together in faith and in hope and in confidence that if we are walking side by side, we will cross the sea together and come to the place that we know we deserve to be together in the Promised Land.
Okay, so everyone ate breakfast? Bellies are full. So when I say good morning, this is prime time right now, so I expect a resounding good morning back. So good morning, everybody. Good morning! All right. I just want to say thank you to Reverend Lloyd for asking me to speak. Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here. And my name is E.J. Smither. I'm a member of the Greater Framingham Community Church, and I'm a senior at Ashland High School. So as we celebrate the life of Martin Luther King Jr., I want to talk today about sacrifice. So first, everyone raise their hand. We've all heard of MLK, right? We all know. Just raise, yep. Keep him up if you know he was a civil rights leader during the 60s. Keep him up if you know that he was a preacher. And keep him up if you know that he was assassinated. All right. So we all have the basic knowledge about MLK. So I'm going to try and tell you something that you don't know and help you look at his legacy from a different perspective. And I'm going to start by telling you a story. The year is 1925, where a baby boy is born in Omaha, Nebraska. His father dies when he's only 6 years old, and when he turns 13, his mother is hospitalized. With no parents at home, he moves from foster home to foster home, hanging with the wrong kind of people, and they will eventually land him in prison. In prison, this young man joins the Nation of Islam. The year is 1952. He's released on parole. He fights for black empowerment. The FBI watches him. He grows distant from the Nation of Islam and embraces Sunni Islam. He's the founder of the Organization of Afro-American Unity. In 1965, members of the religious group he held dear assassinated him while his family watched. This young man was born Malcolm Little, and we know him as Malcolm X today. So why am I talking about Malcolm X on MLK Day? That's probably what some of you are thinking. But in order to understand my message, you need to understand them both. We know that both MLK and Malcolm X believed in different paths to achieving their goal of equality. They both wanted the same thing, and they both took certain steps to achieve their goal. The first thing is that they were never alone in their struggle. Both surrounded themselves with the right kind of people to back them and support them. MLK at the NAACP, an organization whose members guided him, protected him, and supported him. Malcolm X was in prison, and before he found the Nation of Islam, he was lost, and they helped him get back on the right path, and they guided him. They helped him turn his life around through his Muslim faith, and he became a better person. Having the right people behind you takes the weight of implementing change off of one person's shoulders and makes it more likely for success. The second step is sacrifice. Both Malcolm X and MLK made sacrifices to achieve their goal. Time, money, blood, sweat, tears, everything. Think about that. They never even saw the fruits of their labors or the conflict resolved. Fighting throughout your life for a cause and dying for it and never seeing the result. We wouldn't be here today without their sacrifice. I know I wouldn't. Sacrifice is important to making any change, completing any task, and achieving any goal. Now, I'm not saying if you want to get an A on a test, you need to make the ultimate sacrifice, but you should spend less time playing on your Xbox, or I have a PS4, so I would probably spend less time on that and more time studying. If you want to be done with your Common App, then you should spend more time on the Common App website and not more time out hanging with your friends. As my mother was encouraging me, or harassing me to write that, this is and she was on me. Oh my, she was on me. She said there's always more time to hang out and there's always more time to have fun, but there's one thing that you never can get back, and that's time. So that's the most valuable thing in the world, and you can never have too much, and you can't waste it. The small sacrifices are important too. It shows growth and discipline, and you can win brownie points with your parents. So I can probably go And we wouldn't be here without the sacrifices of Malcolm X and MLK today. So if you walk away with anything, I want you to walk away with this. If you're not willing to make sacrifices to achieve your goal, then you're not truly committed to seeing it succeed. Thank you for having me, and that's all.
In 1963, at the March on Washington, my shero, Marian Anderson, sang a version of this selection, "He's Got the Whole World in His Hand."
He's got you and me right
That was great. That was really, really good. As you can see, we're kind of moving along here. And pretty much what we've done at this point is moving us to this point where we're going to hear from our keynote speaker, Dr. Roslyn Artis, president of Benedict College in Columbia. Much warmer than it is right here, South Carolina. All good, though, all good. But she has some familiarity with the Northeast, so this is not a total culture shock or shock to the system, if you will, for her. I just, in learning about her, there just ain't enough time in the day to talk about all that this woman has done in a very short period of time. And I feel privileged and honored to learn so much more about her and what she's about. And you can find out a lot of that information on page 8 and 9 in your book. I told y'all I got y'all. Y'all don't need to search. It's on page 8 and 9. And the fact that it's on page 8 and 9 lets you know this woman ain't playing. But we're going to hear from her in a little bit. I just want to give you a little bit of information about her, just so you won't be completely in the dark, and understand why it's so important that we have her here, and why she's here, because I'm just ecstatic about this. She is the first female president at Benedict College, and guess what? I didn't have to tell y'all gonna clap. Y'all know. And that was the second time that she was the first at a college as a president, which is just phenomenal. There's a ton, I mean, she's on just a ton of different boards and civic groups, and has really made her mark on the educational system. And I wish I would have known about her 4 or 5 years ago, because when I read that she found a way to cut tuition by 26%, it could have saved me a whole lot of money if I'd have known. But again, that's just one of the many impressive accomplishments that she has been able to get done in a relatively short period of time. And so, like I said, I would encourage you all to take a look inside the book and at her impressive bio. It really is. She is, without question, what we would call an agent of change. And that, when I think about Martin Luther King Jr. and his memory and his legacy, we're all privileged and honored to have someone before us who falls along those same lines as far as being. So, I'm going to stop flapping my gums and let you hear from the one that we truly came to see, and that would be Dr. Roslyn Artis.
Thank you. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. I bring you greetings from Benedict College in Columbia, South Carolina. Benedict College is the HBCU that put the BC in HBCU. We are firmly committed to the proliferation of opportunities for young people of color in particular, those who have often been disenfranchised and overlooked. Benedict College stands as a beacon, for we believe in the transformative power of higher education, and the abiding faith that we have in our Creator, and the ability for each of us to make a positive difference in the lives of others. Allow me, thank you. They're in the famously hot city of Columbia, South Carolina. Yes, that is actually our slogan, the famously hot city of Columbia, South Carolina, where we gather at this very hour to also pay tribute to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. As has been alluded to in the introduction, I am no stranger to the Northeast. I'm actually a native of Massachusetts, born in Springfield, Massachusetts. Jim Naismith, Dr. Seuss, Roslyn Artis. Didn't you guys know that? So I told my children that when we visited, and they laughed at me too. I am a work in progress. I am a work in progress. And so I'm very happy to be home, though it is the coldest day of the year. In the Northeast, you know what they say, cold hands, warm hearts.
I am confident that this room is full of warm hearts as we join together in celebration of one who has done so much for the entire country and, in fact, the world. Allow me to begin by expressing my appreciation to Reverend Dr. J. Anthony Floyd and the Greater Framingham Community Church for extending the invitation for me to celebrate with you. It is truly an honor and a privilege. Special thanks as well to Ramel Herring, chairperson of the MLK celebration, for her hard work and gracious hospitality. She demonstrated the warm heart that I referred to, and so I'm very grateful. Honored, of course, to share the stage, not the pulpit, on this day with Senator Spilka and our distinguished mayor, and of course Chief Trask and the Master of Ceremonies, and EJ, amazing, amazing to be upstaged by a senior in high school. But you know, humility and grace go before us, and so I will try to keep pace. One of the amazing things that attracted me to this morning's celebration really is the theme. For when people get caught up with that which is right and they're willing to sacrifice for it, there is no stopping point short of victory. EJ discussed sacrifice with you, and interestingly, it's as though he was reading my email, because I intend to also discuss the themes of sacrifice. Perhaps that is that good, great minds think alike, or average minds find the key word in the sentence. It could be either. The theme for this morning, of course, was taken from the letter from Birmingham jail, written in 1963. From a jail cell in the margins of a newspaper, the only paper that King had access to initially, the letter from the Birmingham jail was a brilliant essay on the perils of a lawful, not lawless, a lawful society, written without the benefit of a computer, without the benefit of a cell phone, without the benefit of Google. King effectively and eloquently addresses the moral dilemma of complacency, and from his position of relative discomfort, exalts the value of sacrifice for the greater good. In modern day vernacular, he walked it like he talked it. Fortunately, there are those among us today that still follow his great example. Toward the end of 2019, I had the opportunity to enjoy an advanced screening of the movie Just Mercy, which is based on the experiences of Bryan Stevenson, an idealistic, Harvard-trained African-American lawyer who has committed his career to serving as a voice for the voiceless, poor, overwhelmingly minority death row inmates, some of whom are suffering from varying degrees of mental illness, some of whom are minors or were minors at the time of incarceration, some innocent, and yes, some guilty, but all deserving a modicum of God's grace and mercy. The movie, which I highly recommend, is now out and available in theaters, is based largely on the story of Walter, a.k.a. Johnny D. McMillian, an African-American man who was convicted of murder and sent to death row, absent any actual evidence of his guilt beyond the coerced testimony of a convicted felon. The movie challenges our assumptions about guilt and innocence and the impact of poverty, racism, youth, and mental illness on such assumptions. I urge you to read the book and to see the movie, if you haven't already. Each forces us to explore our feelings about whether the justice is in fact blind, and whether the man-made rule of law should be challenged when such laws are immoral and unjust in their application. Recall that in King's letter from the Birmingham jail, he eloquently addressed the issue of civil disobedience in the face of unjust laws. He wrote, and I quote, "The answer lies in the fact that there are two types of laws, just and unjust. One has not only a legal, but a moral responsibility to obey just laws. Conversely, one has the moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. An unjust law is no law at all." King further stated that laws are unjust if they pertain to one group differently than another.
All right.
Our criminal justice system, colorblind on its face, yet grossly disproportionate in its impact on low-wealth minority communities in this country, is a modern-day example. Our history is replete with examples of laws that would fall into the category of the unjust, including Jim Crow laws, chattel slavery laws, Fugitive Slave Act requiring the return of runaway slaves as though they had no right to freedom, separate but equal educational opportunities, redlining and housing, and reserving the right to vote unto only land-holding whites. The list goes on and on. Unjust laws like these and so many others were overturned by the brave acts of civil disobedience, persistence, hard work, and sacrifice. There it is, the word that captures the essence of my conversation and EJ's here with you today. For when people get caught up with that which is right and they're willing to sacrifice for it, there is no stopping point short of victory. Let's talk for a moment about the willingness to sacrifice for something you believe in. 3 years ago, my husband and I had the opportunity to see the movie Selma. You may note the theme here. We are fans of films that document the history of our people in this country. While the entire movie was compelling, I was struck by a scene during which Martin Luther King is delivering the eulogy for Jimmy Lee Jackson. Jimmy Lee was shot and killed by an Alabama state trooper following a peaceful protest. Jimmy Lee was a Vietnam veteran and a deacon in his church. His only crime was the desire to vote. He was a living sacrifice for the right to vote. King was racked with grief over the murder of Jimmy Lee and implored his fellow mourners to remember that Jimmy Lee was murdered by the entirety of society, all of us. Every officer, elected official, every citizen who stands idly by while African Americans are literally murdered in the street. He also indicted every person, including black people, who choose not to join the fight for equality in America for all of its citizens. It's on us all. This would prove to be a timeless message. It is as true today as it was in 1965. We are all responsible. We have a responsibility to do the right thing and to ensure a just and equitable society for all. For when people get caught up with that which is right, and they are willing to sacrifice, there is no stopping short of victory. Martin Luther King was a prophet. He was a visionary behind the greatest speech ever composed, I Have a Dream. Delivered on August 28, 1963 to over 250,000 civil rights supporters from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial during the March on Washington. The speech was a defining moment in the civil rights movement. Toward the end of the speech, King departed from his prepared text for a partly improvised oration on the theme, I Have a Dream. His departure was prompted by Mahalia Jackson's cry, tell him about the dream, Martin. Tell him about the dream. King described his dreams of freedom and equality arising from a land of slavery and hatred. John Meacham writes, quote, with a single phrase, Martin Luther King Jr. joined Jefferson and Lincoln and the ranks of men who have shaped modern America. Martin dreamt a future with no laws promoting segregation or prohibiting the full participation in the bounty of these United States of America. In the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, a dream is defined as a strongly desired goal or purpose, something that fully satisfies a wish. It was MLK's dream that we would all live together peacefully in a society that judged us by the content of our character. But there is an alternative definition of a dream that is equally relevant to my remarks here today. A dream is also defined as a state of mind. marked by abstraction or release from reality. Who among us has the luxury of that? An escape or release from reality? To be sure, our present-day reality includes the internet, blogs, text, chats, and tweets. Our reality includes 24-hour news cycles, reality TV, and Lord have mercy, the real preachers of Atlanta. Our reality includes unemployment, low-performing schools, violent, sexually explicit music, and recreational drug use. Our reality includes terrorist attacks, school shootings, and tweets from the Oval Office. Who in their right mind wouldn't rather stay in bed and dream? But that is not the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and that is not who we are today. Many would argue that the dream has been realized. In a technical, legal sense, voting rights exist. Segregation has been struck down. Many of the unjust laws I referred to earlier have been overturned and are no more. Why, we've even had an African-American president. Surely the dream has been achieved. If you believe that, I have 2 words for you. Wake up. I believe that if Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were here, he would breathe for us as surely as he did for Jimmy Lee Jackson. And he would implore us to wake up. No more time for dreaming. We must wake up. Merriam-Webster defines awake as follows: to cease sleeping, to become conscious or aware, to become active. If Martin were here, he would say, wake up. He would implore us to get caught up with that which is right and be willing to sacrifice for it. Now, I know that no one in this room listens to secular music. But go back with me, if you will, to a time BC before Christ entered your life and fully occupied every element of it. When you listened to the radio and attended dances and parties, some of you may remember the song by Teddy Pendergrass, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. Marvin Gaye later recorded it, and most recently, in 2011, a group of socially conscious hip-hop and R&B artists re-recorded it in the tradition of We Are the World. The lyrics go a little something like this. Wait, no, I'm not going to sing it. Don't get hurt. See, I saw you all sucking your breath. I'm in that other half, the back 9. The lyrics go, wake up everybody, no more sleeping in bed. No more backward thinking, time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There is so much hatred, war, and poverty. Wake up all the teachers, time to teach a new way. Maybe then they'll listen to what you have to say. Because they're the ones who's coming up and the world is in their hands. When you teach the children, teach them the very best you can. For those who are tempted to hit the snooze button and continue the dream, I would caution you, get out of bed, put on a pot of coffee. We have work to do. Although we no longer live in an era of mass lynching, we have not crossed over into an idyllic post-racial society. A large segment of the Black community remains trapped in a vicious cycle of generational poverty, systemic academic underachievement, double-digit unemployment rates, and an understandable resentment associated therewith. This brewing undercurrent and racial tension in many American cities that seems to be affirmed and upheld by unjust laws simply will not pass. It will take intentional, purposeful strategies to address the root cause and to eradicate the dysfunction that exists in many of our communities. We are the ones we have been waiting for. Our cities need stronger families and better governments, as well as education and prison reform. A fundamental question we must all ask ourselves on this day and always. Do we have the collective moral will intellectual capacity, and emotional commitment to change our nation and make Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream a reality? Are we willing to sacrifice, to double down, and to commit ourselves to doing whatever is right, no matter the cost? Brian Stevenson, whom I referred to earlier, has given us a modern-day example of just that type of persistence and sacrifice. In his life's work with the Equal Justice Initiative, he has, quite literally, saved hundreds of lives and changed unjust laws that bind and condemn us as a nation. Though he faced incredible judgment, humiliation, and death threats, he did not back down from pursuing that which is good and right. Brian is a beautiful modern-day example of what Martin Luther King Jr. stood for, fighting for love, compassion, and justice for all. African Americans plainly still suffer prejudice across America, but that is not the only inequity that persists and plagues us as a nation. Right. America's problem is increasingly one of class, not race. It is an issue of poverty. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated while advocating for the rights of the poor and disenfranchised. While color may be the most obvious distinction between us, social class and poverty status is that which divides us most sharply in this country. We cannot be silent on this issue. We cannot stand idly by and leave our brethren behind. We have the power to change the hearts and minds of men by sharing the love of God and by advocating for just laws that apply equally to everyone, regardless of whether they are man, woman, boy, girl, regardless of race, sex, or socioeconomic status. Poverty should not be a crime in the wealthiest country in the world. We must get caught up with that which is right and be willing to sacrifice, for if we do, there is no stopping point short of victory. We are in an election year. Surprise. Some of you may have noticed that. Will you vote your heart, your confidence, or will you vote for what is comfortable for you? Will you vote for tax advantage or equity for all? Whatever your party, I ask only that you exercise the right to vote in a way that honors the sacrifice of many who died before you to ensure that you would have that right. Anything less than that is unjust. Injustice can only breed more injustice. We must take a stand. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We must always remember the sacrifices of those like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. However, we cannot shirk our responsibility going forward to change the world. We have been given an opportunity. Each day that we rise, we are given a new opportunity to make a positive difference in the world. Very often I'm greeted with people who say, "It's great to see you." And I often respond, "Better to be seen than viewed." If I had an opportunity to be seen, it's a good day. We are living in a time when hate is popular, where incivility is commonplace. Social media has afforded those with divergent views a bully pulpit and a medium for spreading, spewing hateful rhetoric. We stand at the precipice of a war, and the expense of the same is measured in both dollars and lives. Yet many will stand silent. We are unwilling to engage one another as humans and embrace the toxic cancel culture that allows us to unfriend or turn a blind eye on anyone or anything we deem unpleasant or unworthy of our attention. While many, most of us, abhor any form of violence, hate, inequity, and disenfranchisement, we stand silent. We stand silent. What if Martin Luther King Jr. had been silent? What if he had refused to take a stand, to be clear, to be brave, to sacrifice for us all? Where would we be today? Silence is acquiescence. We were not placed here to acquiesce to inequity. It is our responsibility to take a stand and to give voice to the voiceless. The solution to injustice is not silent voices. It is in raising our voices and advocating for those less fortunate, that we might all enjoy the prosperity promised in this country and in this world. Raising our voices as citizens is the only way to dispel the melody of prejudice and the refrain of mistrust and suspicion in this country. So through dialogue, we will recall the sacred truth. As Americans, that which divides us will always pale against that which binds us. We are one. Blacks, white, rich, poor, police, civilian, we stand together to make a positive change. Each of us has a role to play. During the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Martin Luther King Jr.'s son, MLK III, said, and I quote, "Polished marble can display the nobility of a great leader, but not the meaning of his ideas and contributions. Stone may be beautiful, but it is mute. It is up to all of us, every American, to give it voice. I am that voice. You are that voice. Each of us has something to say and a contribution to make. For when people get caught up with that which is right and are willing to sacrifice for it, there is no stopping point short of victory. We are collectively the voice for the voiceless. A country cannot prosper when children are hungry, innocent are persecuted, and opportunity is reserved only to the wealthy. As Brian Stevenson said in a recent TED Talk, quote, "We will ultimately not be judged by our technology. We won't be judged by our design. We won't be judged by our intellect and reason. Ultimately, the character of a society is judged by how they treat the poor, the condemned, and the incarcerated. The opposite of poverty is not wealth. The opposite of poverty is justice. They are like phrases from sermons, exhortations or righteous actions, and excerpts from the letter from Birmingham jail." Whatever your thoughts on capital punishment, Brian Stevenson's example is that of Martin Luther King Jr. A willingness to get caught up with that which is right and to work and to sacrifice for it. Because in that sacrifice we find justice, love, peace, and equity. We must ask ourselves on this day and every day whether we are willing to sacrifice for that which is right. Martin Luther King Jr. made the ultimate sacrifice. And while it is not my desire that anyone should die for the cause of justice, it is my hope that each of us will search our souls and find our moral compass. Where does your compass point? Does it point toward justice? Does it point toward compassion for others or toward individual comfort? Does it point toward individual prosperity or the eradication of poverty for all? Each day that God grants us is an opportunity to choose. Choose ye this day, and you will serve. I choose to be brave. I choose to sacrifice in my chosen field profession. Each of us has a calling. The calling on my life quite clearly is not to preach, but rather to teach. However, I am crystal clear that the greatest textbook ever written is the Holy Bible. And it teaches me love. It teaches me to love my fellow man, woman, boy, and girl, regardless of race, sex, socioeconomic status, or sexual orientation. It teaches me that all are worthy of God's grace and of his mercy. And by extension, each of us should extend that same grace and that mercy to one another. In doing so, we are fulfilling Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream, and we're doing it while we're wide awake.
To God be the glory for the life of Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you for allowing me to share your celebration.
Take my hand, lead your servant home, hold my hand. I am so tired, I am weak, I am worn through the storm, through the
The church needs a strong voice and an effective leader for youth and families, someone who can cultivate and nurture a devoted congregation, a pastor with spiritual passion and the courage of an outspoken advocate in the spirit of Dr. King. And with that, I welcome Reverend Dr. J. Anthony Lloyd, who will share some closing remarks and the benediction.
Good morning, good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
What a great morning it has been. I want to give a shout out to our MC. Appreciate so much for your coming with us. Indeed, I want to thank very much all those who have supported our coming together. It's important that we take a moment out of what we do and participating in the struggle each and every day to celebrate. And how do we celebrate in moments like this, when on the national and an international stage, there is much for which we could cry about. All right. Much for which we could be discouraged about. But indeed, I'm sure, as the speakers have shared, from EJ to Dr. Artis, so good to have you with us. It is about sacrifice. For when one sacrifices, one moves from sitting and being in tears and discouraged. One learns to stand and have a voice, make a decision, be counted, be in attendance, make a difference. And sacrifices are always so much about us as it is for the next person. Our sacrifice for them. Indeed, on one scale, I'm thankful for all those who are part of the Greater Framingham Community Church, especially our Christian education ministry, for your sacrifice and working hard all year long to get us to this here moment, to breathe a little. Indeed, we're thankful this morning for all those that have participated in the program. I thank especially and so proud of EJ. I sat at the table with teenagers over there, and I'm saying, "Ma, he's making it look easy." Proud for not only what you have done, but what you shall do. And indeed, as has been made reference, we don't say enough about our parents who speak into our lives. And I congratulate you both. You did it because you love him. You did it because he belongs to you. And you continue to do it because you believe in him for what God wants to do with him. Big things, take those steps. You can do it, and we're proud of you. Reminded the other day, Saturday, we gathered at Framingham State University, and thank God for that university in our neighborhood. There were over 300 youth who gathered for our MLK Youth Conference. It's a good time to sit there and listen to the students. They participated. I was struck by their intellect. I was struck by the deep questions that they had. I was struck by their curiosity. And watched from one workshop to the next as they made dream boxes in one to another one. They wrestled with some of the difficult questions that we all wrestle. Maybe not speak about it, but we wrestle with them. And their ability to speak out in a sense for which they joined together. In that time, I took a moment of greeting and I shared with them, and let me take a point from that point. I'm sure for some of you, since our reference today to movies left and right, a movie that came out recently called The Green Book. It reminded me of my experience of growing up in Philadelphia, and when we were ready to take a road trip, parents would, the four of us, put us in an old car. How much we rehearsed over and over. Now you need to go to the bathroom. No, did you go to the bathroom? Because there are no extra stops here. And how they would pack together a fried chicken sandwich and potato salad. We all pile in that car. Most cases we left late at night or early in the morning. All I know was dark out. Piled in that car and then started to head south, going to see relatives. The Green Book was about a book that was a travel guide. I can remember my father, before the trip, pulling out that Green Book. He had made that trek, I don't know how many times, but every time he pulled it out. That Green Book was a book that indicated those safe places where you could stop to go to the bathroom, buy gas, stay in a motel, or just a place where you knew full well on the road while traveling and you get into a tight spot, you knew who you'd call on. Thought about that years later when the movie came out and reminded myself of the sacrifice of so many people willing to get on the road then, a road that was not safe. And today still, in our traversing this community and communities beyond us, it can be unsafe. Dr. Martin Luther King knew what it meant. Get on the road, to travel, and yes, to reach those places that were in the Green Book. And that was a place where he could be safe. And I want to challenge you today, as I think about our young people. I'm going to have them stand in a moment. They've got to traverse or travel this here road. And as they do, they need to have places that are in the Green Book. Places that, for which when they arrive, there's not going to be somebody that look at them because of their color of their skin, or where they came from, or what their dialogue, or how much money in their pocket, and they give them a second look and say, do you belong here? That's not a safe place. They need safe places along the journey where they meet up with someone who will take them in, speak life into them, remind them that they can dream, remind them that they have the capacity to do it. Places in the Green Book. They need schools that are in the Green Book, where educators take seriously that they educate our children, that they do so from a perspective that, number one, we have people in our education system that looks like them, and those that don't look like them understand them. And all of them believe that they can. In the Green Book. Places, yes, along the way, where all I really want to do is to stop in, get a greeting, put some gas in the car, maybe get a cup of coffee. Places in the Green Book where you shop, where you go to school, where you worship, where when you walk in, nobody looking at you as somehow you are there not to buy but steal. Places in our community where we ought to feel safe, for which we work hard to make sure that violence is not commonplace or normal. Are you in the Green Book? Are you individually in the Green Book? Where you work, where you play, where you live, where you spend your money, is it in the Green Book? Is it where our children can go and feel safe and have a voice, and a voice that's heard? Our commitment must be that indeed we provide some spaces along this journey. Our young people are taking the journey. They're dreaming big. They're going after things we never ever considered. And I applaud each one of them for doing it. But I would assure you, they cannot do it alone. They need many of us, some of us, who pulled out a Green Book and checked out where we were stopping at before we stopped. And for others who never had a Green Book, but you understood what it meant to be in a place that was safe, where you could dream, work hard, and acquire that dream. Stand right on up. All across the room. You want to look at me. Stay standing. Stay standing. Yep. You deserve our applause. And while you stand and we look at you, we want you to know full well, we understand you need safe places. Safe places to think creatively as we know you can. Safe places where you can dream as we know you can. Safe places where, yes, you are judged by the content of your character and not the color of your skin.
All right.
These people in this room here, some of them have been on this journey a long time. They've checked out green books. They've made sure there's some places in those green books. Why? Because they understood what is right and were willing to make a sacrifice. A sacrifice so that you can dream today and tomorrow and the next day. And in fact, some of you will take some road trips that we never ever dreamed of taking. But we know full well y'all going to do it. And along the way, every now and then you've got to stop at a place that's not in the green book. And when you do, I want you to remember all these folk in this room right here and then more. And when you look around and see them, I hope that reminds you that you may have stopped at a place that's not in the green book, but you know full well you belong there. And you'll open up with your voice, and you have to, as Martin Luther King did, tear some faces up. And if for some reason along the way, you bump into some situation for which you say, this is uncomfortable. I made that stop and I'm not sure it's on the list. I want you to be comfortable enough to know that you are made in the image of God. And with that, God expects you to be woke. Woke for the journey. Not only you being woke, but you wake everybody else up around you. Wake them up. Tell them in those snooze. Wake them up because you are on your journey. For all the rest of us, create some spaces. Demand some spaces where folk who look like you and don't look like you are accepted, heard, understood. Yes, indeed. Do so because it's the right thing. It's our journey. We're willing to make the sacrifices. Do so because MLK did, and you can as well. Won't we all stand? Thank you so much for coming today. We're going to be singing this great freedom song, We Shall Overcome. We'll walk hand in hand. We shall all have peace, and God is on our side. and God is on our side. 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 Oh, deep in my heart. So now go from this place. Go knowing full well that you are committed, yes, to sacrifice, for you know what is right. Do so in season and out of season every day. Do so whether or not someone notices you or not. Do so, for indeed God is on your side. Do so whether a space is one that's in the green book or not. Create that space. Do so not for yourself alone, but do so for others, especially for our children. Indeed, they've got to travel this road. May God bless you and happy MLK Day. Thank you.